and welcome to Bruxelles Je t'aime, Euronews' talk show all about the European capital of Brussels. On Brussels, my love, we break down the big stories of the week, examine what's at stake for you and for Europe. My name is Mairead McGuinness. Thanks for joining us. Well, this week, global leaders and the business world gathered in the Swiss town of Davos for their annual get-together, and Brussels, my love, was also there. So this week's special edition comes to you from Davos, so let's cross over to me.
Yes, welcome to Davos, to the so-called Magic Mountain, where it's currently minus 13 degrees. Coming up this week, we sit down with Alexander Stubb, the former Finnish Prime Minister, to find out what the big announcements of the World Economic Forum this week were and how it impacts me and you. And we check in with one Bulgarian MEP who's been rubbing shoulders all week with the greatest minds in the tech world. But first, let's bring in Mairead McGuinness. That's the Irish Commissioner responsible for financial stability. Mairead McGuinness, welcome to Euronews. Thanks for being with us here on Brussels, my love. How has Davos been for you so far? What have you been up to here?
It's a bit cold, but apart from that, we were expecting it. I mean, I'm only here for one day, effectively, so I'm trying to get a flavour of not just European issues, but global issues. And there is a lot of talk here. What's been really interesting from a European point of view is that the predictions about where we would be in terms of the economy are not as pessimistic today as we look to the future, and that's positive. But we're also quite cautious about what might come at the end of this year. So we've managed an energy crisis. Can we continue to do that? I think that's been very interesting.
And just on that optimistic note that you mentioned, because the International Monetary Fund in fact did lighten the mood perhaps here among Davos participants about the outlook for the economy this year and of course next year. But what about people back home who are watching this meeting taking place in Davos and they're saving more money, they're having less children, they're afraid they can't even make ends meet?
Yeah, I think we know that the cost of living crisis is very real for people in Europe and elsewhere. That inflation is also there, but again, on that, the story is a little bit better than we might have expected.
And just briefly on Davos, Mairead McGuinness, is Davos a good idea?
Look, this is my first time, so I won't make a judgment until the end of today, for example. And maybe I was one of those who looked at Davos from afar and thought, why is this necessary? What's going on here? So far, I think what's useful is you pick up very interesting views and information. It helps policy formation. I think it's important from a European Commission point of view that we meet other players and policymakers from large and small parts of the world.
There's a big team from the European Commission
Yeah,
here.
I mean, the Commission does turn out. We're not here for the full week, but we're here for when it's important for us. For example, I've had good discussions around sustainable finance, taxonomies. How do we move from where we are today on this transition towards what's more sustainable? And it's good to hear the criticism of what we're doing as well as the praise so that we can, if you like, tweak where it is necessary. So there's lots of reasons why you might say, yeah, it's good that people come together. But I also think that we shouldn't dismiss those who question whether all of these policymakers coming together, is such a good thing. What for me is important is it's transparent. So I'm here with you, I'm talking publicly, and I report publicly, and I'm accountable. So it's not as if I'm in dark corners. I really think it's important that policy is made in the public eye.
But perhaps overshadowing this meeting, when you talk about transparency, is the corruption scandal that hit the European Parliament. You're, of course, one of the former vice presidents of the European Parliament. How is that staining the image of the European Union here, and what should be done about it?
Well, I mean, it's shocking, and I think it's awful, and none of us had anticipated anything like this. As you say, I was the first vice president of the Parliament. I think December was a bad month for the European Parliament, and I think for Europe generally, because a scandal and a corruption in one institution has its impacts across the board.
And just here in Davos, Mairead McGuinness, is the EU speaking with one voice? Because while Davos was taking place, the President of the European Council, he was off to Kiev on his own.
Oh yeah, I think Europe speaks with one voice. We might have different conversations at different times, but there's a unity of purpose across the institutions. And what's healthy is we disagree sometimes as well. That's okay too. As I've discovered, I would have been closer to the European Parliament because that's where I came from. I now realise that the Council sometimes takes very different views. So I wouldn't worry about that at all. I mean, some people are concerned when they hear different voices across the European Union and regard that as, a lack of unity. How Europe works is there are different voices, and then we come to a point where there's unity. So no issues around that at all.
And the big announcement this week, of course, from the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, was regarding the countermeasures regarding the IRA, this Inflation Reduction Act, this Net Zero Industry Act she's putting on the table. Will this do the trick, or will it just create tensions among EU member states?
Well, I think it's fascinating. I've just heard that the Inflation Reduction Act is more discussed in Europe than the United States, but we have to discuss it because it has implications for our competitiveness, for the clean tech sector and for our race towards sustainability. But we're not going to throw everything at it. I think it's a very measured proposal. So you look at state aid framework in order also to recognise level playing field issues. You look at a fund that will be required. And I think we're also still talking to the United States about where they might tweak what they've done in order not to disadvantage the European Union, because we actually appreciate what the United States are doing around climate, because they haven't always been as engaged. So that's a plus. But we don't want to see, if you like, companies and a relocation because of the attractiveness of subsidies and supports and tax breaks in the United States, where we have to be as smart on this. Sometimes Europe can be more complicated, so it can be more difficult. We can't, as a Commission, say tax breaks, but we can talk to the Member States around that. So there will be an evolution and more detail on these proposals, including when the European Council meets. But we have to respond. I think the response is measured. We now have to make sure that whatever we do works, because of all of this discussion around support, sustainability, etc., we've had a lot of talk, we've a lot of proposals, and I think what we now need to see is where is this actually having a positive effect. But it would be really remiss of Europe to allow big companies literally move. That's not in our interests.
And just finally, Mairead McGuinness, you said the European Union can be very complicated. It can also be very slow, not just the European Union, but globally. And we heard that from the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, when he spoke this week to the forum via a video link. This slowness that's impacting as well the war in Ukraine. When will it end, do you think?
But we can often be very quick as well. So sometimes Europe acts very swiftly, as we did around vaccines, etc. I think the war in Ukraine is of a whole different dimension. And I think there is an appreciation in Ukraine that Europe is doing and should do what it can. And it looks, sadly, as if this war could prevail for longer than anyone would have ever thought of or indeed expected. So I think we take the criticism, but we also respond in an appropriate way. Even look at how we've responded to the impacts of this, not just on the energy sector, but across Europe generally. So we take that criticism, but I would say that Europe is very determined to stand by Ukraine. We've managed to send money there just this week. We will do more, and I think if you listen to the words of the leader of the Commission, President Ursula von der Leyen, she's very determined that we will stick with Ukraine, including being physically present very soon in Ukraine.
Of course, on the 3rd of February, that EU-Ukraine summit taking place. Mairead McGuinness, Commissioner for Financial Services, thank you so much for speaking to us here in minus 13 degrees from Davos on Euronews. Well, now we've heard the view from the European Commission, so it's time to go inside the Congress Centre and sit down with Alexander Stubb, the former Finnish Prime Minister. Alexander Stubb, welcome to Euronews. Thank you for being with us here on Brussels, my love.
Thanks for having me.
How has your Davos been so far? What have you achieved here?
Well, it's been very good. I always enjoy coming here. I think it's my 8th time. So I do a lot of meetings. I'm in a lot of panels. I do a lot of media. What am I achieving? Getting a lot of new ideas. I'm writing a book. So this is the place to get steroids for the brain.
You said it's your 8th Davos. So you're obviously not new to this game, this Davos game. Tell us what the big announcements were this week here. I imagine Ursula von der Leyen's big announcement yesterday on her measures to counter the Inflation Reduction Act, the American subsidy package. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, the starting point is sort of, careful consent, I guess, because we have to remember that the European Union's success, especially in the economy, is based on 3 pillars. One is a single market, and that's basically about the free movement of goods, services, people and money. Number 2, trade. So the fact that we get those goods and services moving and flowing around the world. And the third one is competition policy, or what the Americans call antitrust. And I'm a little bit worried about the direction in which some of the state aid issues are going in the European Union at the moment. So that's why I'm lukewarm to this proposal. I don't like the fact that 50% of the state aid goes to Germany and 30% goes to France. That's not the way in which we compete and improve the internal market.
So you don't think it's a good idea to loosen those state aid rules?
I don't think it's a good idea. I actually think that we should stick to the competition policy that we've had. And be very careful of protectionism, because protectionism basically, it's a slippery slope and it becomes a vicious circle. Europe has been built on free entrepreneurship. It's been built on competition. We don't want to thwart that competition. Now, does this mean that I don't want there to be green subsidies? Of course not. But remember that the RRF, or Recovery and Resilience Facility, is 790 billion euros. The US equivalent, IRA, is 270 billion euros. So it's not a question of, shoveling money onto something. It's a question of being competitive and innovative.
And what are you hearing here at Davos behind the scenes on the relations now between the EU and the United States? Have they managed to kind of ease them over this week here?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the whole feeling I have is actually that, we're witnessing transatlantic partnership 2.0. And that is, of course, in many ways thanks to Putin. The US was about to pivot to China and Asia, which it has, for all intents and purposes, done. But now it has certainly not turned its back on Europe. It's been an instrumental piece, obviously, in the fight for freedom in Ukraine, together with the European Union. So a lot of the sanctions have been coordinated, military aid has been coordinated, and I think a lot of European leaders are thankful to Joe Biden and his administration for what they've done. So let's not exaggerate the IRA issue at this stage. I think the transatlantic partnership is alive and well.
And the war in Ukraine, obviously a massive topic this week in Davos. Madam Zelenska was here saying that you can't take a day off from war, explaining and illustrating the impact it's having on her country. A lot of debates here as well about the fact that the war will not end unless more weapons are provided to Ukrainians.
Yeah, and I fully agree with that thesis. I mean, 2 points on this. President Zelensky has put out a 10-point ceasefire or peace plan, and I think we should, of course, support that. That does include going back to the borders of 1991, which basically means pushing Russia out of not only the territories that it has tried to invade, but also the Crimean Peninsula. The second point I want to make here is that, and it's easier for me to say as an academic now, and not a prime minister anymore, or foreign minister, but I do think that we should take the lesson from Mario Draghi in the Euro crisis. And I think basically when it comes to financial aid and when it comes to weapons, we should use his phrase, whatever it takes. That's what we need to do on the European side. The only path towards victory is aid coming from us and the United States to Ukraine.
And is the unity still there among the 27 when it comes to their stance against Russia and the sanctions?
I've never seen the European Union more unified than what we are right now. I mean, of course, you're going to have a few ripples here and there, and, Hungary is kicking and shouting on occasion. And, you're going to hear some, disagreements on a few issues. And obviously some countries are struggling, for instance, with military aid, say in tanks. I mean, take Germany as an example. We have to understand that the cultural change in German foreign security policy has been radical. I mean, they talk about Zeitenwende, so the change of time, but it's been a little bit of a Zeitenslalom instead, and it's understandable. So there are going to be, a few tugs here and there, and not complete unity, but for all intents and purposes, I've never seen the European Union more united than now.
And while we've been here at Davos this week, as you mentioned, Hungary, Viktor Orban was presenting ideas to dismantle the European Parliament because of the scandal that rocked the institution before Christmas. How has that tainted the image of the European Union here at Davos?
Well, never underestimate the capacity of Viktor Orban to cause some noise around things European. But on a more serious note, it is self-evident that if there is, and when there is, a corruption scandal evolving in the European Parliament, there is a reputational risk, and it is a hit to the image of the European Union. And especially, the European Parliament. Obviously, the European Parliament is trying to rectify the issue and dealing with it, I think, very well with the leadership of Roberta Metsola. Has it affected the role of the European Union here? Not radically. I haven't heard that much talk about it. But it is a very serious issue and has to be dealt with seriously. Because, again, if we claim to be, as we are in Europe, a liberal democracy, believing in the rule of law, then that law has to be basically followed. There are no exceptions.
And what about the EU's role on the global stage? And here, of course, at Davos, is it speaking with one voice? And I know Charles Michel, the President of the Council, should have been here, but he cancelled his trip in the end.
Well, I mean, yes and no. Obviously, the big speech of the week here from the European Union side has come from the Commission President, President Ursula von der Leyen. And in that sense, there is one voice. But are there going to be other heads of government and state that are going to give a slightly different message? Yeah, of course. But that's what it's like. The European Union has 27 member states, and in that sense, it has 27 voices. So we should perhaps stop with the illusion that the European Union will always speak with one voice. Now, geopolitically, though, I'm quite optimistic about Europe's future. And the reason is that I think geopolitics has been redefined. It used to be only tanks and weapons and military. But nowadays, we can see that everything can be used as an instrument, well, for war or at least power. So you can use a currency, you can use trade or sanctions, you can use technology. Well, you could say that Ursula von der Leyen's speech was a response to the US subsidies on IRA. So, and all of these are instruments that the European Union has. And a lot of times it has an exclusive competence on them as well. So I think the geopolitical position of the European Union right now is actually quite strong.
I'm just going to stop you there for a minute, and we're going to look at this clip together, because while we've been here in Davos all week, my colleague in Brussels, Paul Larocque-Hoppeneau, has been out on the streets of the city asking people if they know what the World Economic Forum here in Davos is and what they think about it. Take a look.
I heard about it, but I'm not sure to know exactly what it is.
Not at all. I've never heard about it, so no.
The same, I don't know. Yes, I know what is it.
A lot of rich people basically gathering into one little ski village to talk about everything and anything, really.
Not that I'm aware of, but are you talking about the one in Davos? Davos, yes. They're all living in little ivory towers, haven't got a clue about the common man.
For sure there might be an effect on me, but I don't feel it in my day-to-day life.
On my daily life, maybe not, but on the long term, sure, certainly. Because they make economic decisions that impact the world economy, that then impact me as an individual.
I think that it can affect my life, because some of the decisions that will be taken there will have an impact on our wallet. It's as simple as that.
I don't believe anymore all the meetings all over the world.
So, your reaction to that clip there, Alexander Stubb, people there feel that you're very rich in an ivory tower here. Would you agree with that?
I wish I was rich. I understand the ivory tower thesis, definitely, because I think we as humans quite often feel that if we're not part of a particular process or don't follow it, it's something against me. So I understand the sentiment. At the same time, I think when it comes to bringing together global political leaders from politics, 600 CEOs, from NGOs and civil society, this is a good place to have conversations and perhaps even improve the world a little bit. I'll give you one example. Gavi, the Central Organization for Vaccines and Distributions of Vaccines, it's actually a World Economic Forum idea. And there are many of these examples. So, it is a talking shop, but at the same time, it does a lot of practical stuff.
And bring us behind the scenes of this talking shop. Like, what's an average day here for you? Who do you meet? What do you get up to? Do you get any sleep?
Well, yeah. So basically, I'm usually here for 4 to 5 days. It depends a little bit. And I am who I am, so I, of course, start with the gym early in the morning. But usually the calendar shoots from, say, 7:30 to about 10:30 in the evening. And it's filled with, say, anywhere between 12 to 18 meetings or panels or media engagements like this one, or just meeting leaders. I roam a lot around these corridors just to see old friends and jumps and say hello. So it is really, it sets the year in many ways. You come here and you get a sense. So, I remember 2017, it was all about President Xi Jinping after the election of Donald Trump coming to talk about the virtues of China and multilateralism and the rest of it. Then it was all about COVID, or then it's been about European competitiveness, or now it's a lot about Ukraine and the possibility of recession in Europe. So it's a super interesting place to roam around.
And is it also a place for politicians to let off a bit of steam? What happens in Davos stays in Davos.
Well, to a certain extent, yes, but I think the reality is that whatever you say nowadays in politics, you expect to see that out somewhere. But I do think a lot of politicians come here and kind of enjoy the freedom from domestic politics for a few days.
Okay, Alexander Stubb, that is all we have time for. Thank you so much for being with us here on Euronews, and thank you for watching. But don't go anywhere, because after the break, we'll be catching up with the Bulgarian MEP Eva Maydell, and I'll also be giving you a little tour of behind the scenes here at Davos. See you soon on Euronews and Euronews.com. Welcome back to Brussels, my love, with me, Maeve McMahon, for this special edition coming to you from Davos in the Swiss Alps. Now, as I promised, I'm going to show you now behind the scenes of Davos. But first, let's catch up with the only member of the European Parliament who's here in Davos. That's, of course, apart from the European President, the Parliament President, Roberta Metsola. Eva Maydell, Bulgarian MEP, hello.
Hi, nice to see you here.
Nice to see you too. Is it your first Davos too?
It is, actually, yeah.
And how's it been so far?
Interesting, busy, awesome in a way, meeting so many different people, some that you know and others you don't, going out of your bubble, telling about your bubble, but listening to other stories about what can we do better, how can we cooperate, and most importantly, how do we find solutions.
Going out of your bubble, but being here, I feel like it could almost be the European Parliament.
Maybe the colors, but apart from that, you see, the colors of the building might remind you of the European Parliament, but otherwise it's a much more colorful and vivid place in terms of the people you can meet. And there are different backgrounds and experiences. And I think that's why it's important to be here to share what we do, but to learn, to get informed about the newest trends in tech, for example, in sustainability, to be part of some of the pitches that are being launched here and some of the important announcements. Like tomorrow, I'm attending an event at the Ukrainian House where we'll be talking about the new GovTech Center that is set up in Ukraine. So I think some of the announcements are exciting. Of course, it's very hectic and it can be a hassle a little bit, but I think having the opportunity to meet people from across industries, across the world, just in a week, it's fantastic. Otherwise, you would need to travel for, 2-3 months to meet all these people.
So who have you met?
Yesterday, there was a fascinating discussions of tech entrepreneurs, but also thinkers that was put forward by Professor Woods from the Blavatnik School. And I thought this was really interesting because we kind of saw and understood about our different perspectives. And you could tell how much different it is. The way, a Silicon Valley entrepreneur and a scale-up thinks compared to the way we think and the way we perceive some of the newest technologies that are emerging out there. And then you have conflicting views of two different professors exploring the use of artificial intelligence. And so I think having the possibility to contradict each other, to debate, to discuss, makes it a really, unique place.
So it's not just an exclusive elite talking shop?
I think that's not the case for a very long time now. I would like to think that. I would also like to think that with each gathering, hopefully we'll hear more about the solutions and not just about the problems. And this is why I was excited to meet also European entrepreneurs that provide numerous solutions to some of the most pertinent problems, such as climate change.
And the European Commission President was here, Ursula von der Leyen. This morning she used her moment in the stage to present her new plan to counter the Inflation Reduction Act. What do you think of her plan?
So, first of all, I think it was great that she used the stage to speak about the plans that we have. They're not yet there with the concrete text on the table, but I think it's important to say that we would like to empower our industry, that we are looking for ways to kind of make the proposal of the Green Deal, this super proposal now by actually investing in our industry. Whether we'll achieve that, we'll see. But these are at least the intentions, and I think it's important to share that to investors, to companies across the world, but also to our American friends, because I would have much rather like to see the opportunity for us to be engaged into dialogue, to see where we could collaborate more together, rather to feel like they've put forward, a proposal that could severely damage our industry.
And just one final question for yourself. Eva Maydell, Bulgarian MEP from the European People's Party. Huge story in Strasbourg, of course, this week was the corruption scandal that keeps on giving. It's tainting the European Parliament's image and, of course, that of the EU. Has it scuppered any of your meetings here at Davos? Is it something that's come up at all?
Just very briefly, I will say, I think people are much more focused on what we can deliver and what are we working on, especially in the sphere of clean tech, the sphere of tech. And they would like to learn and get to know the essence of our work. Because ultimately, if they would like to do business in Europe, they would have to abide by those rules. So for them, this was the leading story, so to say, in our conversations.
Okay, Eva Maydell, thank you so much for being with us here on Euronews on Brussels. My love, we will see you soon back in Brussels or Strasbourg.
Looking forward.
Now, as promised, I told you I'd show you a little bit of behind the scenes of Davos. And as the media centre is located a little bit far away from the Congress Centre, the WEF have provided this wonderful buggy service to transport ourselves and our equipment throughout the day. What you see on TV when it comes to Davos is very different to what as well goes on behind the scenes here. It is a 5-day-long hub of networking, of lobbying, and also the day people don't sleep here. It starts very early in the morning and goes on till the early hours. There's a long promenade as well over here to my left, which is normally just a street here in the village of Davos where people normally would go shopping. But for this week, it's like a massive trade fair. And of course, the more money you have, the nearer you can get to the action and the more coffee and pleasantries that you can provide to people and lure them into your stand. Everyone's a VIP, so there's no specific VIP zone. It means that when you go for a coffee, you can bump into a prime minister or the head of a central bank or a US congressman or woman. It's a fascinating place to meet, and that's why so many deals are brokered here. And how's Davos been for you?
It was amazing, actually. Yeah, it was refreshing seeing new faces, connecting with people from different countries. I'm from Jordan. I came from the Global Shapers community to represent Amman Hub. And to me, it was such a wonderful experience, actually, to talk about different challenges that are affecting our global communities and maybe discussing ways to tackle them effectively.
And it's such a hub for networking. I mean, you know, you spend so much time in your life emailing and calling people in order to meet them for coffee. Definitely. But here, everywhere you go, you catch somebody.
Yeah, I mean, as much as it's like wonderful, it's also overwhelming, but in a very positive way. It's just nice to connect with people from different sectors, like tell them, oh, what do you think about, what are your insights on this particular subject?
Thank you so much. Thank you for your insights. Enjoy Davos and see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Bear in mind that not everyone has a badge to enter the Congress Centre. Many people come to Davos just to network outside the perimeter on this so-called promenade, which I mentioned earlier. Well, that brings our special Davos edition of Brussels, My Love, to an end. Thank you so much for joining us and see you soon here on Euronews and Euronews.com.